The night the city forgot to sleep, a single moment quietly waited to change two lives forever. On a crowded train platform soaked in fluorescent light and exhaustion, a young woman clutched her baby as if the world itself might slip away if she loosened her arms. She did not know that the stranger beside her, silent, distant, wrapped in an expensive coat, was a man whose name moved markets and whose decisions shaped thousands of lives. And he did not know that when her head gently rested on his shoulder, something he had buried long ago would finally wake up. Stay until the end, because this is not a story about wealth or poverty. It is about the moment a heart remembers how to feel. She had not planned to fall asleep. Sleep had become a luxury she could not afford since the day her husband died in a factory accident, leaving her with a 6-month-old baby and a stack of unpaid bills that grew heavier than grief. Her name was Aisha, and she had learned how quickly the world becomes sharp when you are poor and alone. That evening, she had spent hours standing in line at a public hospital, the baby burning with fever against her chest, only to be told that the medicine was out of stock. She took the last train home because walking would have been impossible with legs already trembling. The baby finally slept, his tiny fingers curled into her worn shawl, and the moment her body felt still, exhaustion claimed her without permission. The man beside her stiffened when he felt the weight on his shoulder. His first instinct was irritation. He was used to control, to personal space, to people stepping aside when he walked through a room. His name was Arman Halim, CEO of one of the country's largest logistics companies, a man praised for discipline and criticized for cold efficiency. He had just left a board meeting that ended with applause for profits and silence for layoffs. He was used to silence. But this silence felt different. The woman leaning against him looked impossibly tired, her face pale, her hair loosely tied, her arms wrapped protectively around her baby even in sleep. He could have moved. He could have shaken her awake. Instead, he stayed still. The train rocked gently, and something unfamiliar stirred inside him. Memories he rarely allowed surfaced without warning. His own mother, years ago, riding buses late at night, pretending not to be tired so he would not worry. She had worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, and never complained. He had been too young to understand then, too busy chasing success later. Now, with a stranger's exhaustion resting on his shoulder, the memory pressed hard against his chest. The baby shifted and made a small sound, and Arman felt his throat tighten. When the train stopped, Aisha woke with a jolt, horror flooding her face as she realized where she was. She apologized over and over, pulling back, her voice shaking with embarrassment and fear. She expected anger, maybe harsh words. Instead, Arman simply asked, quietly, if the baby was all right. No one had asked her that all day. The question broke something open inside her. She nodded, then shook her head, tears spilling before she could stop them. She turned away, ashamed of crying in front of a stranger. Arman handed her a clean handkerchief without a word. They got off at the same station. Rain had started falling, thin and cold. Aisha hesitated, unsure how she would manage the walk home with the baby and her aching body. Arman watched her struggle to adjust the shawl, to protect the baby from the rain, and he surprised himself by offering to help her get a ride. She tried to refuse. Pride was sometimes the last thing she had left. But the baby coughed softly, and she nodded. The car ride was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Aisha spoke little, yet her silence told a story of long nights and quiet courage. When they reached her neighborhood, Arman saw the narrow streets, the dim lights, the buildings that leaned with age and neglect. He felt something settle heavily inside him. Before she stepped out, he asked a question he did not usually ask anyone: "Do you have what you need tonight?" She hesitated, then told the truth. No. He handed her a card, simple, without titles. "If you need help, call," he said. She looked at him, disbelief and gratitude tangled together, then disappeared into the rain. Arman went home to a penthouse that had never felt so empty. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the weight on his shoulder, the sound of the baby breathing, the way Aisha had tried to carry everything alone. For the first time in years, success felt incomplete. And that is where the real story began, because one night of stillness had cracked open a life built entirely on motion. If you think this was just an act of kindness, stay with me, because what followed did not just change her future, it reshaped his purpose, his company, and the meaning of everything he had worked for. Days passed, but Arman could not forget. He found himself distracted in meetings, questioning decisions he once made without hesitation. When a proposal crossed his desk to cut costs by reducing support staff benefits, he paused. He thought of Aisha standing in the rain, He asked questions no one expected. His executives exchanged glances. Something was different. Then the call came. Late at night. Aisha's voice trembled as she spoke. The baby's fever had returned, worse than before. She did not ask for money. She apologized for calling at all. Armin listened, then told her where to go. He arranged a private doctor, covered the treatment, and stayed on the line until she said the baby was sleeping peacefully. When the call ended, Armin realized his hands were shaking. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without feeling this nervous. Over the following weeks, he learned more about her life, not through pity, but through respect. She had been a tailor once, skilled and proud, until factory closures and rising rents pushed her into survival mode. Armin did not give her charity. He offered opportunity. He helped her get back to work through a small training initiative he quietly launched within his company, aimed at supporting single parents with flexible hours and fair pay. Aisha became one of the first participants. What began as one exception became a system. Armin restructured policies, introduced childcare support, healthcare access, and job security programs that many said were unnecessary. Profits dipped briefly. Critics spoke loudly. But something else happened too. Loyalty deepened, productivity rose, and stories like Aisha's multiplied. People worked not just for a paycheck, but because they felt seen. Months later, Armin attended the opening of a modest community center funded by his foundation. Aisha stood there, holding her now healthy baby, her eyes bright with confidence instead of fear. She thanked him, but he shook his head. "You reminded me," he said softly, "of who I was supposed to be." As he watched her walk away, laughing as her child reached for the light, Armin understood the truth that had eluded him for years. Success without compassion is just noise. Power without empathy is empty. And sometimes, the smallest, quietest moment, a tired woman falling asleep on your shoulder, can wake you up in ways nothing else ever could. So if you ever think your pain goes unnoticed, remember this: you never know whose life you are changing just by surviving one more night.